Hello, I'm Terry McGill, and you're with Who's Your Neighbor? And it's right there on the screen, fortunately. So, what's this all about? Because of COVID and the stories I started hearing and reading about, social separation, social isolation, um, we've already been a pretty separate society, literally not knowing who our neighbors are. Um, Fortunately, I do know one across the street and one on either side of me, but I had to make myself get out and do it because it wasn't what I usually had done. But then with COVID, things got more. And so I started thinking about that. And someone said, why don't you do a show to introduce people to people who make a difference that nobody knows about? And so that's what this is about. It's about connection, inclusion, collaboration. And so far, I've been introducing you to people, if you've watched before, that's why I say I've been, they're people that I've known, some for 25 years, and they're like, wow, only one is well known and not that well known. So I'd like to introduce you to someone else tonight that, now I've been on a lot of tables, chiropractic, acupuncture, you name it, several different, many more modalities. But Ayleyaell Kinder, and she'll tell you it's pronounced A-Lee-L, and that really helped me learn it. But on her table, I had experiences, shifts that changed me significantly more than just about anything. So I would like to introduce you to this magic woman. Ayleyaell,
Hello.
hello.
Hello, Terry, and hello, whoever is listening.
I am so happy to be able to chat with you for half an hour. Um, First of all, would you give us more than just a thumbnail, maybe a two thumbnail sketch? What you do is SHEN works, right?
SHEN Therapy. SHEN Works is the name of my email and of my website. But there are other SHEN practitioners, far too few of them. And that's something that I and a few colleagues are aiming to change pretty soon. So SHEN Therapy, SHEN, first of all, is an acronym. It stands for Specific Human Emotional Nexus. And it
Say that again for me.
Specific Human Emotional Nexus.
Nexus?
Nexus,
So
or
nexus is
place where things meet, where things connect.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. And the person who developed SHEN was very aware of its some of its meanings in Chinese, and also knew that humans throughout history all feel emotions in the same place in their body. Nobody says, I love you. It's always, I love you. So love is felt at the heart. And there are other emotions not as expansive and wonderful to feel as love, such as shame and guilt and fear. And each one of those impacts in a particular way in the body. In acupuncture, they work with Fa Qi, very specific points. In SHEN, we work with what's called Wei Qi, which is a whole area, a whole region. Sometimes it's called a chakra. Sometimes it's called a soul house. In SHEN, we just refer to it as an emotion center.
So where is the shame emotion center?
It would be below the navel and above the pubic bone, that whole area.
Really?
Depending on how you've been impacted, it can be a smaller area or take over and cause all sorts of problems through the whole pelvic region. And one of the things I wanted to talk about was the lines of tension, because it doesn't stop there. It can pull down from the throat, from the heart, from the digestive organs, but the linchpin, so to speak, might be in that area, depending on the person.
So again, we're all different.
Yes, and also very similar.
What I noticed the first session, and again, because I'm a repeater, uh, the changes in me were significant, and I never really grokked the emotion part of it. So now I'm getting it. It's like, okay, Shen, specific human emotional nexus.
Yes, SHEN for short.
Right. So you told me once how many different things and how long it took you to get certified. Would you give us a thumbnail sketch of that?
Well, on my mother's side, I'm a sixth generation healer. So I come by this kind of honestly, if you would. So my grandfather tells stories of the palace in the area sending a coach in the middle of the night for his grandmother to go and attend to the royal family when their physicians couldn't heal what was going on there. So that's been
What
passed
country
down.
was that?
Yeah. Yeah.
What country was that?
Oh, it's a country that changed so much. Technically, it's Transylvania, but it's Romania, Hungary, Austria. My grandfather would tell stories again that you might wake up and have a completely different nationality. Something would have changed overnight. But
Wow.
essentially, it's Transylvania today.
So that's your genealogical background, but what about this Shen training? I
The,
remember you were sharing about it. It's like that's like getting a PhD.
Pretty much so. I came to SHEN after a whole long litany of very honored, some famous, some deliberately wanting to be out of the limelight studies that went on from the time I was around 2 all the way through to when I was introduced to SHEN therapy. The SHEN training itself, SHEN is a science. It's not very complicated, and people can learn the basic techniques and the theory in about a week. However, SHEN is an art, and the practice and where it's applied and how to listen and how to take care of yourself while you are facilitating someone else. That, after doing it 30 years, I still am practicing and learning and getting better.
What amazes me is your awareness of what I'm not aware of until you bring it up, and then I have to focus to become aware of it. And yet it's so significant. I don't even have the words to say, well, how does it affect you, Terry? It's just huge. I just don't know how to phrase it.
That might actually be a good thing. I can tell you that the effects are visible, they're tangible. People's posture changes, their face animates, they youthen. Now, I'm one of the younger people practicing SHEN. As I said, there aren't that many. And I've watched people in their 90s and 80s all of a sudden look like they've dropped 20 years, 30 years when they release some of the tensions that have distorted their physicality. But it doesn't work on just one level. I'm not just, I'm using the chi between my hands, but there's a lot else, there's a lot more going on as I'm working with the person. And I'm also drawing from what I've learned previous to that, including what was called the listening hand that I learned from Alana Rubenfeld, who was one of the first people back in the 50s. When you talked about body work, people thought you worked on cars. And she was one of the first to put together the fact that when you touched something released that was beyond just structure. And she put together what's called Rubenfeld synergy, and I was in her very first class. Talk
I,
about
I remember it was Ellen.
Alana Rubenfeld. That
Yeah.
was back when I was
working with a Rubenfeld therapist 30 years ago, probably.
Probably that sounds about right. That was when it started. But if people are interested in my history, I'm not so interested. Everything is listed, not everything, but a good part of it is listed on my website under About Me. You can find out more about some of the people.
I know our producer has your website ready to show everybody, and then he'll park it over in the chat room too. And I want to say welcome and hello to our guests. We're on Facebook Live and YouTube also. I had to stop and think. And yeah, there's your website, shenworks.com. I like the little play there. Shen works. I'll testify to that. So that's where they can find out more about history, background, things like that?
Yes, and a little bit about what it's like to be on the SHEN table, and also some of the science behind it, because it very much was founded with the idea that it's science-based and not just wishful thinking or woo-woo, that there's science behind it.
So what was the other thought that I just, right. If a person wanted to connect with you, had a question or two, would it be best to go to the website, or is there another way to check in with you?
You can phone me directly. You can email me. Since everybody is an individual, people's histories are different. Sometimes SHEN is not appropriate in the moment. Very, very rarely, but occasionally it is. So people apply and share a little bit about what they would like to heal. And also, I should say that I can work remotely, thanks to what I learned at the Portland Tao Center. SHEN, speaking of being in touch and being connected, our body is also a neighbor. It's our closest neighbor. And when people have stress and worries and impactful experiences, they react in a couple of different ways. Everybody's familiar with flight or fight. There's also numb. There's also a lot of people who aren't really aware of what they have, or they might be aware of a top emotion, which might be a little grief or a deep grief. Underneath it are all sorts of other things can be. And that's one of the things that happens on the SHEN table. That's called magic, and what I call alchemy.
So that you just said something that really surprised me, because you use your hands, and that's been my experience, has been on your table, and you have one hand usually somewhere on top, and then one hand, it seems like I don't even feel it, it's underneath somewhere.
Yes, you spoke of a table, but when people come to SHEN, they're actually lying on a padded, what's called a SHEN cradle, which is anchored to a massage table. And there's a space in between the bottom of the cradle and the table. And one hand is very often underneath that. So what I'm doing simply is feeling what's happening between my hands. And between my hands is part of somebody's anatomy. So the nice part about that is I don't have to do any manipulation. I don't have to do anything invasive or intrusive. And the truth is my hands can be above the body as well without touching at all. I'm still getting the information that I need, and also sending through the chi in my hands a particular focus that relaxes what might be buried or stuck or blocked there, and loosening it up and lifting it to the surface where it's going to dissipate. And then also all of a sudden something very, very, you called it magic. Other people have called it magic as well. But something happens in the person. All of a sudden they get insights, or options, or whatever they were struggling with just dissipates, and they discover when they go back into the world that events that used to trigger them, they just they don't. They just go, that's interesting. And there isn't a lot of work involved. There is, the more that you can be present, you mentioned mindful, the faster the results come generally, but not always. Some people simply fall asleep on the table, and then they take a couple of sessions and their life changes.
So let me go back to, because you're doing the work between your hands, but you can do it remotely?
Yes. What I've discovered, not me personally, what I learned personally, but others have discovered, is that we are vibrational fields. And SHEN itself works very much on field physics. When studying with Dr. Rulin, and I realized that time and space, there's a quantum entanglement, there's a connection, that it doesn't matter if the person is physically in my presence or on the other side of the globe. I haven't gone extragalactular yet. I've just stayed with Earth. But
you're not working with Martians.
It can be as effective therapeutically, but as you mentioned, for the whole premise of who's your neighbor, the idea of having somebody work with you with a listening hand, and that kind of touch that allows you to be yourself and doesn't ask you to change or anything like that, that fills a very deep craving in so many people. So if you can, in person is superb, and it can still work remotely.
So I know you have mentioned at one point, I think people actually book sessions and fly in for an intensive. Is that what it's called?
Yes. I lived in San Diego where I studied SHEN, and I was there for 26 years, and I have a very large clientele. In San Diego, which is a fun destination anyway, I had people fly in from all over the world. Now that I moved up to the Pacific Northwest, I get calls from folks in San Diego, some of which come when it's cold and are faced with something that they'd like a couple of days of SHEN with. And so an intensive is anywhere from 3 to 10 or 15 sessions in a very short period of time, like a weekend or sometimes longer.
Wow. Is that draining for you?
I thought it was going to be. It's not, because as I am working with someone, I'm circulating my own energy. And so I don't physically get tired. I might get a little mentally tired. But I go into a particular place where I make myself available to heaven's energy and earth's energy, and that comes through and is doing the work for me. So all I'm doing simply is listening and placing my hands where I can feel is the right place, knowing the SHEN protocols, and facilitating when something is blocked or stuck. And it's extremely pleasurable.
So for our watchers, listeners, now and in the future, because this is going to be archived forever. So if you'd like to have a session in person with Ayleyaell, she's right across the Columbia River from me. In fact, I think you're only about 20, 25 minutes from me. I live right off of Highway 205, and you're right off of Highway 205 on the Washington side and I'm in Oregon. So if you don't want to fly to Oregon or boat, drive, it doesn't matter where you are in the world. This woman has magic hands. I testify to that, and works remotely too. And I'm seeing some comments. One comment. Let me read that. Her SHEN sessions are worth every effort, life-changing. My dear friend, how wonderful to see you live. Miss you.
Oh, so, and who is that? Because unfortunately, I'm not seeing
Turner.
Oh, Laura. Yes, Laura is a fantastic person. I could talk for full half an hour about what she does as well. It is life-changing, and there are several people I know would not still be incarnate if they hadn't had Shen. And before I met Master Shaw, Dr. Master Shaw, I worked with and was so privileged to study with Sifu Sher King Lu. And he would say that if you save a person's life, one person's life, you save an entire world. And so my very favorite people to work with are those who work with others, teachers, and a lot of famous people have been on my table as well. And since I don't have permission to give their names, I can't. But
Right.
the joy of knowing that I've really been able to make a difference just is very humbling.
So there is a question from one of our viewers who's saying, why is it called Shen? And Jean, what I would suggest is this is recorded. So because we only have a few minutes left, I invite you to, once the recording goes up on Facebook and YouTube, to watch it from the beginning. It is fascinating. And Ayleyaell, I am so glad that we have connected, because I've been worked on, worked with, worked over, and hammered. Literally, there's a doctor, I don't know if he's still practicing down in Eugene, who had it's an instrument with a rubber pad on it, and it goes boom, like that. And it changed how my neck worked. I mean, it was just like, it just, and he told me what it worked and how and why, and I didn't remember it, but I was just amazed by it. But there's so many different people and therapies, but what I've found is, and the reason I wanted to invite you and the other guests that we've had, and the ones that we have booked, and the ones that I have yet to discover and ask if they will come on this show, is I want people to meet you and the others, because there is such a richness in our community. And by community, I mean, the Portland metropolitan area. You're right across the Columbia River. You're in the Standard Metropolitan Statistical Area, SMSA.
As now says, I'm 6 minutes from the airport when you check the middle of the night when there's no traffic. So I'm very, very closer to Portland than the airport than a lot of people. I do have a very special announcement. I want to make sure that there's some time for it when we're done.
Please give it
right now.
Right now.
It has been since COVID way too long since we've had a SHEN workshop. And workshops are given for two reasons. One is to train people to become SHEN therapists, but the majority of people who take the workshop are for their own healing. So you don't have to think of even becoming a SHEN therapist. But we're going to have one in the Portland area in May. So that's announcement number one.
So did I hear today or another time that one does not have to be a SHEN practitioner yet to come?
Correct. You can come whatever your background is. There is a prerequisite, and that is that you have at least one and preferably 2 or 3 SHEN sessions, so you know what you're getting into. Because this has been called big medicine, and it will go down and get things that have been buried, that you've forgotten. You don't have to work to remember anything. You don't have to do a lot of writing or a lot of talking. But you will be surprised at what comes up to the surface and in the SHEN training. So we want to make sure that you know a little bit about what you're getting into.
So that's May 2022.
Yeah, we don't have the exact dates yet because we're looking for a venue, and we're not sure if it's going to be residential, which offers a lot of advantages, or whether it'll be one where you commute. Generally, the training itself is 9 to 5 with the evenings free.
That's exciting. Portland is such a, a hodgepodge. I don't like that word. Um, there's so much here. There's I counted them up once. I literally me and somebody else started tabulating. There was over 108 spiritual groups. Um,
Wow.
and I forget how many different schools. There's the Oregon Health Sciences Union, which is part of the Oregon education system. But then there's the National College of Naturopathic Medicine. There's what used to be Western States Chiropractic, and I forget what it's called now. And there's more. There is so much here. I've been here for quite a while, like 1959. um, Portland is just a gathering place for people with open hearts and a desire to serve. That kind of goes with an open heart.
Yes, I love living here. I mean, I've lived in San Diego, I've lived in New York, in New York City, and I love Portland. Love this whole area.
We're right at the ending of our time, and I want to say thank you so much for being a guest on Who's Your Neighbor? Because, well, in your case, if you live in the Portland metro area, she's one of your neighbors. But if not, boy, I started to say you're a multi-dimensional being, but let's just hold it to the planet Earth. It doesn't matter much where you are. If you have internet connection, Ayleyaell can give you an experience that, in my experience, is unique.
Terry, thank you. I'm so honored that you invited me to be a guest here when I read the premise. I'm so glad I can do my part to help.
Thank you so much. And so Karen will take you into the back room, and he did immediately. So there is one thing that I would invite all of you, if you would like to have not a SHEN session, but if you would like to have what's called a Tao Hands blessing or light transmission, I'd like to offer you one free. And our engineer will post the link in the chat room. And all you need to do is, there it is, popped up immediately. I love our engineer. He's just magical. So this is literally worldwide too. You go on the internet, you go to that page, and there's a banner at the top, and right underneath it, would you like an instantaneous Tao Hands blessing? The word instantaneous is like, you what? And it's true. You put your name in and your email address, and blink, immediately another window opens up, and you'll receive free. You only get it one time free. A 10-minute Tao Hands. You can think of it as an energy transmission, a light transmission, a blessing, whatever term, experience and see what you think of it. And then if you would like more, there's videos on that page. One of them is just really amazing. Can you imagine being told by a doctor, because of the pain in your hand, that the best thing for you is to amputate your lower arm? Excuse me, I'm in the wrong place. And so Gills started looking around, and he had one Tao Hands healing, if I remember right, and 90% of the pain was gone. I was just amazed. Still am. It's like, wow. So I'd like to leave you with that. And I'm Terry McGill. Who's your neighbor? Good night.